Welcome to this month's Creation Justice webinar, a gathering place for building a faith-rooted and faith-sustained movement addressing many of the critical issues of our time. I'm Brooks Barrett, the Environmental Justice Minister for the United Church of Christ. I'm joined by my co-host, the Reverend Michael Malcolm, who is the Executive Director for the People's Justice Council and Alabama Interfaith Power and Light. Michael, on any given day, I think that we and many of the folks in the audience could be in a room full of people devoted to seeking justice, and it would be easy to imagine at least one reference to building a movement, building a national movement, building a global movement. I began this webinar just now by talking about building a faith-sustained movement. But what do we mean when we say that? How exactly does that happen? One might think that things just go viral on the internet as soon as one's got a good slogan or a catchy hashtag. Voila, there you've got a movement. Certainly things can go viral and consciousness can be raised across parts of the country in particular moments. But how does one truly effectuate change, say at the level of federal policy? How do we do more than give lip service to phrases like systemic change? These are the kinds of questions that make me excited about our guest, who's going to lift the hood on what happens in the engine of an organization that is able to effectively drive change across the nation, even under a Trump administration. Michael, what are your thoughts as we get started here today?
Thank you, Brooks. It is incumbent upon me to remind each and every one of you that we have entered into some uncharted waters. When it comes to climate and environmental justice, we are facing some real ugliness. Many of the meetings and conversations that I've had and been privy to having, to engaging in, have been about power and the access to it. First, the ultimate power for me is the creator of all things. But then second, we really have a perverse way of looking at power. We often associate power with resources and influence. And while influence is correct in assessing power, resources are not factored in. I can be financially broke and still be able to thrive because of influence. The greatest lesson that I have learned from the last Trump run is that resources mean nothing when it comes to power. People are the power. If we want things to change, we will need to engage the people. Movement building is about engaging the people. Once the foundation is laid, movement grows organically. However, the foundation has to be intentional. I look forward to hearing from our guests to glean nuggets for this tool chest of mine that helps build a base for movement building. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I like that. Movement building is about engaging the people. Let me now introduce our guest speaker for today. Sam DeLay Harris founded his first social change organization in 1980 with an organization called Results, which quickly began to have notable accomplishments in organizing and equipping everyday citizens to bring about change on a national and international level. He would go on to coach other organizations in his model of advocacy. These include Citizens Climate Lobby and Catholic Relief Services. I highly recommend his book, Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. In this book, he gives away the secrets to how organizations can lead successful efforts to get legislation passed. Even during the first Trump administration, Catholic Relief Services was able to get the Global Child Thrive Act passed with veto-proof majorities in the House and Senate. Congress did indeed override Trump's veto. That's just one of many inspiring stories you can find in this book. Let me end my introduction of Sam with a quote from his book that I think captures part of who Sam is and what he instills in others. Time magazine once wrote, "Visionaries are possessed creatures, men and women in thrall of belief so powerful that they ignore all else, even reason, to ensure that reality catches up with their dreams." Sam has been helping countless people become visionaries who compel reality to catch up with their dreams. We certainly need more unreasonable visionaries and prophets in this world. Sam, it is great to have you with us.
Great. Thank you, Brooks. Thank you to the Creation Care team and to everyone who's joined this webinar. I'm going to use some slides later on in the presentation. My goal really is to inspire you about the activism that you're already engaged in or might be more engaged in, with stories and quotes and some different methodology ideas. I've been writing a lot of journalists, frankly, around the paperback release of my book in January. And after the election, I sent a letter to about 300 journalists. And I want to read a little from the letter and then move on. Quote, "For many Americans, this election has delivered exhaustion and divisiveness. After the election, Tom Nichols wrote in the Atlantic, quote, Americans must stay engaged and make their voices heard at every turn. Liz Cheney tweeted, quote, citizens across the country must now be the guardrails of democracy. But most Americans still wonder how, and even if, they can make a difference between elections. What are the options? 1, protesting, important, but usually not the long game. 2, signing email form letters, which only 3% of congressional staff say is highly effective, usually gestures. 3, taking a 2-year nap before the next election, sadly the preferred route of many. But few in your audience, I'm writing the journalists, know about transformational advocacy, which helps you change an issue and changes you in the process. This book includes stories of people who met with elected officials on the other side of their issue, people like Ellie Sparks, who went from experiencing what she called climate trauma to meeting with 20 members of Congress over 4 days and calling the experience sacred and profound. And people like Lisa Jordan, who after meeting with congressional offices in Washington, D.C. said, quote, this work is the best medicine for when you're feeling hopeless or have sleepless nights. It's the best way to avoid despair, end of quote. So this was a letter that I sent to probably 300 journalists after the election, trying to frame the issue in a different way of looking at things. I'm going to start with my why. We should all know our why and share it. And I use Marshall Ganz's story of self. What happened in your life and what decisions did you make that got you to this commitment? I'm going to share my story of self, but I always urge listeners to think about theirs. What is your story? Do you know it and share it a lot? Do you know it but not share it much? Do you need to sit down and write it down? Here's mine. It's a little wacky. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in music, and I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra for 12 years and taught high school music. And 44 years ago, I founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby, Results. And a lot of times I'm asked, music, poverty lobby, what's the connection? And when I look back in my life, there's certain experiences that start pointing me in a different direction. The death of a friend around high school graduation in 1964 and the assassination of U.S. Senator Robert Kennedy around college graduation in 1968 got me to asking the questions of purpose. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? 9 years later, 1977, I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger put on by the Hunger Project. And I go to this event thinking, well, hunger's inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. Well, it's inevitable in my mind because there must be no solutions. Again, what do I know? I'm thinking because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. But I go to this event and it's obvious right away there's no mystery to growing food, clean water, basic health, literacy. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature. People will just never get around to doing the things that can be done. But there's one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my question, why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. In 1978, 1979, I spoke to 7,000 high school students, classroom by classroom, on ending world hunger. And before I went into the first classroom, I read some statements from Jimmy Carter's Commission on World Hunger calling for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 high school students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't want to know if you wrote him. I don't want to know if you met him, just the name. Out of 7,000 asked, 200, fewer than 3%, could tell me the name of their member of Congress. 6,800, over 97%, couldn't tell me the name of their member of Congress. And results, this anti-poverty lobby grew out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger on the one hand and the lack of information on who represents us in Washington on the other. Now, the book, Reclaiming Our Democracy, originally came out 30 years ago. This is a completely revised and updated edition. And a lot of times I'm asked, well, why did you reissue it? And I want to use this question that I was asked in January. In January of this year, I was interviewed on an NPR program 1A. And this was question number 2 by the host. And there are hundreds of thousands probably listening. I was really moved by his vulnerability. Question number 2. The passive nature to our politics now, you can feel beat down by it. I mean, this is my career and I feel beat down by it. This is the host of the NPR show. This is my career and I feel beat down by it. It's much more of an effort for me. I don't participate the same way others do because I'm a political journalist, but I do have to pay attention. It's a grind. It's a grind, Sam. I mean, I know you know that. What am I feeling? What is the way out of that? The first thing I said to him was, Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart said, we aren't passengers on Spaceship Earth. We're the crew. Well, are we? And if we're crew, how does crew operate? The second thing I said was, futurist and climate activist Alex Stephens said, in fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. Well, yeah, if I'm cynical, I'm obedient to the way things are. I'm not going to do anything about it. Why would I if nothing I do makes a difference? The main idea in the book, Reclaiming Our Democracy, and in this presentation is transformational advocacy. We all know transactional advocacy. Sign the petition, transaction complete. But with transformational advocacy, you're encouraged and succeed at doing things as an advocate you never thought you could do, like meet with a member of Congress and bring them on board to your issue. And when you do those things, you see yourself in a new light. You see yourself as a community leader. Now, I'm going to bring up my slides. So it's going to take me just a moment to bring that up. And I want to go full screen if I could. So if you'll give me one more moment, I want to get this right. And Brooks, you might be able to tell me if this is full screen now.
Yes.
Okay, great. So at the end of the presentation during Q&A, not now, there'll be a sign-up sheet. And I just want to go over what it's going to say. I'll go over this once more at the end. I'd like to, sorry, I need to get my, I'd like to receive occasional updates. So if you'd like what you hear and you'd like occasional updates from me, from my Civic Courage mailing list, you could check that box. The next box is going to be different. It's going to talk about results in Citizens Climate Lobby and the Quaker Lobby, FCNL, Friends Committee on National Legislation. But if you check that box, I'm going to take it as meaning you're interested in something that Brooks is going to be launching, Climate Hope Affiliates. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later in a moment. Another box is I'd like to hold a book talk by me at my church, my club, my class. I teach a class. And the last is I'd like to know more about how my organization could engage in transformational advocacy. I'm going to tell stories now. First story, Maxine Thomas. This is Maxine Thomas with her U.S. Senator Todd Young, Republican of Indiana. This is not a selfie. These two are buddies and they work together. Maxine told me that she had a heart for service, but she was clueless about advocacy, especially political advocacy. Maxine has a lived experience of poverty, and she joined a group called Circles, where people work together to learn more and to move out of poverty. And her group realized that they had a story to tell. And they Googled around for groups that could help them tell their story. And they found the Anti-Poverty Lobby results that I founded 44 years ago. She joins our results with her group, and she gets a scholarship to go to the results conference in Washington, D.C. The night before her first ever meetings with her members of Congress, she learns that the Earned Income Tax Credit is about to expire. The Earned Income Tax Credit in 2022 provided $3,100 to low-income working families. So this is quoted from the book. I've transcribed what Maxine said onto these slides. Quote, Maxine, the first congressional meeting on Lobby Day was with Senator Dan Coats, Republican of Indiana, and brought new ahas. He was there for the entire meeting. I can still feel it. I was a ball of emotions. It felt like an out-of-body experience. I was processing being in DC, and now I'm in an exclusive meeting. We're all dressed up. It was high level. The volunteers were polished and sharp, but I was scared. That's pretty much everyone on their first ever meeting with a U.S. senator. But I was scared, worried if I would say the right thing. I think it was Lisa who asked me, would you like to say anything? I thanked the senator and said, I learned last night why I'm here. I didn't know I could come here from Indianapolis to talk to you, someone who represents us and can help us. I can't imagine what will happen if the Earned Income Tax Credit is taken away from families like mine. I'm able to take a deep breath and catch up on my bills because of the Earned Income Tax Credit. I look forward to tax time because that's the only time I can handle my financial burden. I like to take my kids to the mall to buy shoes without worrying if it'll take away from other bills. Senator Coates straightened himself up and said, wow, this has been emotional. Results, you do a good job of training people. Where did you find her? And then he thanked me. That was the year he retired. He was very connected, even though the Earned Income Tax Credit wasn't on his radar. He acknowledged my voice and thanked me for being there. End of quote. Now, after a full day of meetings with her reps and senators, Maxine said, quote, I was euphoric. I was on this high and felt I was part of something revolutionary. That is transformational advocacy, from clueless to euphoric. How do you find an organization that's committed to delivering transformational advocacy? I've simplified it to three things. Let me go over them. One, you're looking for an organization that, one, is engaged in recruitment and building community. Recruitment is bringing new people in, not just to form an e-blast list, but to form local chapters so people aren't working alone. And the community building might include a whole of an organization webinar every month with guest speakers, Q&A, inspiration. 1, recruitment and community building. 2, the organization offers training. How do you get the meeting? How do you plan for the meeting? What do you ask for in the meeting? How do you write a letter to the editor? 2, training. 3, breakthroughs. The organization encourages their members to move out of their comfort zone and have breakthroughs, because confidence grows when you do things you never thought you could do. In the book, there's this drawing, a small circle on the left labeled your comfort zone, and to the right is a much larger circle labeled where the magic happens. You're looking for an organization that won't kick you out, but encourage you out of your comfort zone. Next story. In 2019, President Trump called for a 29% cut to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, after it and its partners had saved 38 million lives since its launch in 2002. When do you hear about the 38 million lives saved? It was time for the Global Fund's 3-year replenishment, and other countries would likely follow the US lead. Now, most people never knew that the president called for a 29% cut. And if they did, they'd probably throw up their hands. What can you do? You can't fight City Hall. The folks I know roll up their sleeves and got to work. They got hundreds of members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, to co-sponsor resolutions in the House and Senate and in support of the Global Fund, and to sign letters to Secretary of State Pompeo and to top appropriators in the House and Senate, all supporting the Global Fund. So what do these revolutionary volunteer advocates look like? Now, normally I would ask you to go to gallery view, which I can't do, I don't think right now, but it's you. That's actually what these folks look like. And they also look like Margaret Smith of Dallas, Texas, sitting here with her Senator Ted Cruz. She said, I learned in results that I hold Senator Cruz's hands with 2 hands, and I don't let go until I've finished my laser talk on the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. That was the first year Senator Cruz ever said yes to a results request, co-sponsoring the Senate resolution supporting the Global Fund. Instead of President Trump's proposed 29% cut, 2 House Republicans and 2 House Democrats stood on a stage in Lyon, France at the Global Fund replenishment and announced that the Congress would provide a 16% increase to the Global Fund, which it did, and President Trump signed into law, which became $1.56 billion a year over the next 3 years. By 2022, the Global Fund partnership had saved 59 million lives since its inception in 2002. Well, next to last story, Ellie Sparks. This is Ellie Sparks. The story I'm going to tell, she was a volunteer at the time. Now she's on staff. She said, when I joined Citizens Climate Lobby, I was suffering from climate trauma. I would read Bill McKibben's book, Earth, and I would weep at home and I would weep at work. But then 18 months after joining CCL, I co-led a workshop on creating relationships with members of Congress and editorial writers. I said, what in the world does a relationship with an editorial writer look like? And how do you get a relationship with your member of Congress? So this is Ellie, quoted from the book. I've transcribed it on these slides. Quote, she said, someone in the organization uses the model of a work relationship. My relationship model is different. I adore romantic relationships, so I use romance as my model. That first meeting with the editorial writer, it's like a blind date, only you've decided beforehand you're going to marry this fellow. You're going to be sweet and interesting, not too intense. If it doesn't work out with the editor, you're going to marry one of his friends at the newspaper. Who do you know that talks like this? The business editor, environment writer, city editor, someone at this paper will find you interesting and compelling. It's just a matter of being persistent until you find the right connection. I see the relationship with a member of Congress as an arranged marriage. If you live in her district, the member's aide has to meet with you. That's what our congressperson's legislative director told us in January. Since January, we've met 5 times. Now, this is August, so in 8 months, since January, we've met 5 times with the legislative director. We schedule 45-minute meetings. He keeps us well over an hour. He doesn't want us to leave. Why? Because a good arranged marriage starts out cold and slowly heats up over time. That's different than a love match, which starts out hot and slowly cools down. Then Ellie shared the essence of transformational advocacy. During our conference, I met with 20 congressional offices. I met with many folks whose view of the world was very different than mine. Going into their offices was hard. I had to let go of a lot of emotional baggage. I could no longer judge them or hold hostility in my heart toward them. I had to let go of my fear of climate change and my fear that they wouldn't listen to me. I had to center myself in love, releasing fear and centering in love. This is sacred and profound work. Who thinks about advocacy as being sacred and profound? Obviously, it can become that if you find the right organization and open yourself up to it. When I work with a group that's meeting with a member of Congress who opposes their bill, I have them ask 3 questions. 1, we know you don't support this bill. What would it take to change your mind? 2, could you say more about that? 3, why do you think that is? It's basically a deep listening exercise. And some have used questions like that to get the first Republican and Democrat to lead the House Climate Solutions Caucus, which was launched in 2016, grew to 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats. When President Trump was elected, it fell to 6 and 6 because some had retired or been defeated. Over the first 2 years of his administration, the caucus grew to 45 Republicans and 45 Democrats. I'm going to just go over this sign-up sheet, which will go in the chat in a moment, and then close with a quote. So one of the options is receiving occasional updates from me, joining the mailing list. The second is it's going to talk to you about results and the Quaker Lobby, FCNL, and Citizens Climate Lobby. If you check that box, I'm going to send your information to Brooks, who's be starting these Climate Hope affiliates in the next couple of months. And so that's where you'll be sent if you check there. The next is I'd like to host a book talk, me probably zooming in to your church, your club, your class. And the last is I'd like to learn how my organization could implement transformational advocacy. I'm going to close with this from George Bernard Shaw's Man and Superman. This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being a force of nature, instead of a selfish, feverish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. End of quote. Thank you for all the work that you've done over the years and maybe decades to make that torch burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sam. I know I'm itching to get in and ask questions. I'm sure we've got questions that are going to be coming in through us from the audience. People can type them into the Q&A icon below. But Michael, give us a question here to toss at Sam.
Yeah, we had an anonymous attendee that asked, "Dear Sam and Brooks, I keep hearing a mantra of finding an organization that is doing this work, i.e. the Quaker Lobby, etc. The fact is that our UCC office in Washington, D.C. is engaged in much of this work, using a variety of both transactional and transformational models at different times. We've used results in the past as well to do trainings. They're asking that we please acknowledge to those attending that the way to engage in this work is also through UCC's organization as well as its structure.
Right. So I've been having multiple conversations with Brooks to even deepen more fully UCC's work in this way. And so I don't know if you want to say anything about it, Brooks, yourself, but where I'm going to just give you the model for just a moment, because I didn't really talk about the model. What Brooks will be looking for, number one, are hosts, maybe in 4 cities to start with, not 40 or 400, some number, 3, 4, 5, 6 cities, someone is willing to get 5 to 10 people together for an inviting team call and talk to Brooks every week during this process. So a month later, let's say 6 people come together with the host that Brooks has found, and the 7 of them listen to Brooks at this inviting team call, and hopefully they're excited, enthusiastic, and let's say they are willing to invite 5 each. Who knows? So 5 for the 7 of them is 35 people. Plus the 7 is 42, which means half would show up if they invite him. So like 21 show up. And then Brooks would lead a chapter launch workshop. And at that workshop, one would find out of the 21 who's ready to be in a creation, one of these chapters. And the chapter would start with a 4-part new group training every week for 4 weeks or every other week over 8 weeks. So it's taking what UCC already does. In a sense, I would call it to a deeper level. I don't know if that makes sense. Brooke, would you say we've had 5 or 6 or 7 calls already, and we're going to go deeper into it as the new year starts?
Yeah. And I think what I would say is that this really, flows out of UCC advocacy that's been going on for years and years and years, and is going to continue to go on for years and years and years. And we're bringing into this river of advocacy that's ongoing, the good model and work that Sam is articulating here.
If I could add one last thing, that's why I said, if you check those boxes that said results or CCL or the Quaker Lobby, I'm not going to send you to them or about them. I'm going to send your information to Brooks for this UCC. I'm going to call it a new offering on the shoulders of what UCC is already doing.
Thanks. Sam, I've got another thing I was hoping you could talk to us about, and I'm going to frame it to you this way. I was having a conversation with a seminary theologian recently, and he was talking to me about a theological concept of hope that can say, come out of the Christian faith, but probably it's not just unique to us in some regards, but that there's a wall in front of you, and you can't see beyond that wall. And the essence from a certain theological tradition is that faith involves a hope that there will be a breakthrough in that wall. Now, that's another way of talking about death and resurrection. But that, I say all that to say, when this was being told to me, the image and word that came to mind when the wall was mentioned was Congress. That was what I thought about. I think for many people, Congress seems like this wall, right? And it's just like we're trying to figure out, like, where's the hope here? How are we going to get to the other side? And I want to say that that your book really did help me with that, right? And I think one concept in particular that helped me with that I was hoping maybe you could expand upon, is viewing one's elected officials sort of on a continuum where you're moving them up a ladder, right? Because I'll confess, in my own cynicism about Congress and politics, it's very easy just to be like us and them, good guys, bad guys, and there's this wall that can't be broken through. So tell us a bit about this kind of moving people up a ladder.
Yeah, great. So let me put it this way. In the book, I talk about a champion scale. Like, my member of Congress is opposed. There's no reason. No. You want to move opposed up to being neutral. My member of Congress is a supporter. No reason to meet with them. They're already no. You want to move supporters up to being advocates, and up to be leaders, and up to being eventually someday a champion on your issue. And so that is part of the work of moving opposed up to at least neutral, for starters, kind of thing. And I'm going to give you an example. If someone's working with a member of Congress, and we do seminars and workshops on the champion scale. If you're meeting or you have a member of Congress who's just generically opposed to, seems like, everything you stand for, I would have the group go to their website and look at their news releases. The news releases are things they've done that they're excited about. I'm going to make up their 19 different news releases. Find one thing that they've done that you actually like, and write letters to the editor thanking them for their leadership on that issue, and hoping they could bring that same kind of leadership to your issue. I mean, that's one example. I mean, then the other examples is, who's the biggest employer in the district, and can you enroll them to be a partner with you in this work? Or who is there an interfaith council or coalition in your area? Then could you engage them to come along with you to kind of break this wall, break this log jam that you were just referring to? I do want to say one other thing, and I'll be quiet. I see the wall that is Congress, but I see the wall that is me, and that is us. And I write all these journalists, and there was one author who had a piece in Time magazine, so I wrote him, but he's actually a professor at Stanford. And the title of his book is Hope for Cynics. I guess it's the other side of your hope question. Hope for Cynics, the surprising science of human goodness. That's the title of his book. And in his book, he talks about, it's like when we operate in it's like we're playing poker and we close our hand before it even starts. And it's like, when I look at that wall that's Congress, and I close my hand before it even starts, I don't even go over there. So that's my wall. There's the wall that is Congress, and then there's the wall that is me, and stopping me from getting involved.
Sam, Nancy asked, are you still involved with the Hunger Project?
Well, I mean, we would not be on this call today with me without the Hunger Project. Do I do things with it every week, every month, every year? No, but that's how I got from my own hopelessness to engagement. And, that's where I started talking to high school students and read about calls for the political will and asked them, who's your member of Congress? And hardly any of them knew. So I'm very proud of the group, but I'm not involved, and it's why I'm here. I mean, initially, I'd still be a music teacher and symphony musician, I think, which is not so bad, but that's not what I'm doing these days.
Right. I'm going to read to you, Sam, another question we've received. Our congregation has been reluctant to do anything, quote, political, yet the UCC has been a public leader in the past for civil and environmental rights. how can we move beyond this barrier and move forward with common purpose to advocate for key issues? The UCC could be a powerful force for good during the coming Trump administration as well as
Right.
after.
Yeah. So I was on a call last night, and one of the panelists was included Hedrick Smith, a former New York Times columnist, and it was a kind of a We the People democracy seminar. And someone was talking about this terrible state senator in Virginia and blah, blah, blah. And, and we got to do this with them. Well, it might not work at your, whoever was asking the question, UCC Church. My work, I have no idea. It's fine with me if people don't agree. My work is trying to do this rather than this. And I would assume that your church, the person asking the question, should have no problem with this kind of advocacy and might have some challenges with this kind of advocacy. And so, if you can make it clear that the goal is creation care, and you will get there as best you can, then I think you have a better route forward, rather than why can't I get my church into the battle? That might be tougher for that church. I have no idea.
Sam, can one thing that really stood out to me in your book was also the emphasis of your organizations on kind of creating a structure of support and structure of coaching. Can you talk about that and how that can, work to, for things like how do we wrestle with our fears and so forth?
Yeah.
How do we do these things we've never done before?
Right. So I'm going to tell a quick story and then get right to that question. I was talking with the head of organizing for a very large, everyone on this call knows this group. And the head of organizing for this very big group said to me, we can't let our volunteers write letters to the editor or op-eds because they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. It's like protecting the brand was more important than empowering the volunteers. And I know in 2019, before COVID, Citizen Climate Lobby's volunteers had 4,300 letters, op-eds, and editorials published that year. So one organization is saying they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. Another organization saying, well, what do we have to do to help them get it right? And as a result, thousands of letters, op-eds. That gets to your question of structure of support. I'm going to tell another story that around it. And I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. Brooks is going to be looking in January and early February for a small number of hosts, who knows, 3, 4, 5, whatever, who agree to that they're enthusiastic about getting 5 to 10 people together for an inviting team call and talking to Brooks every week about how it's going, et cetera, and role playing, whatever. And then a month later, the inviting team gets together, 5 to 10 people, and again, work with Brooks and find out by the end how many each person will invite. If they want to, they might say, I'm not going to be inviting, or I'll invite 10, or I'll invite 2, or whatever. And then there's the launch workshop. Everyone got invited to the launch. And then there's a 4-part new group training. And here's this. Now that's the structure of support. I was talking with this guy who was, it was their first monthly webinar.
Exactly are you?
And he said to me, our chapter is 2 months old, and we've already met with 4 elected officials, 2 state reps and 2 state senators, and one is Washington State. And one of the state representatives was chair of the Committee on Energy and Environment, and he knew everything about climate change, but he barely heard of carbon removal. And he asked our chapter, 2 months old, if we would do a briefing for him and his committee staff on that. And I said, well, wait a minute. You've met 2 state reps, 2 state senators, and your chapter is 2 months old. Had you ever met with an elected before? He said, no, this was I said, had you ever written? No, I'd never written, called, or met with an elected official before this. I said, put that in your talk. Because if you don't let people know this was the first time, they're going to think he's an expert. I'm not an expert. He could do it. I couldn't do it. The point is, you asked the question about structure of support. That 4-part new group training was that structure initially that allowed them to know how to get the meeting, how to plan for the meeting, what to ask for in the meeting. That structure of support allowed them to have those kinds of early breakthroughs, even though they were just a few months old. So yeah, I'm a very, very, very big devotee of structure of support.
So I actually have a question, but it's Sam. It's really not for you. It's more for our audience that's listening to us right now. If we did get into movement building as the UCC and put some real structure and muscle behind addressing some of the issues that we face in society, how many of you would be down to be a part of that? And if you would, just drop in the chat, I'm down. Just drop it in the chat. I'm down, I'm down, I'm down. We would love to hear if you'd be down for that. There is a question from Diana that says, do all of your talks focus on religious organizations doing transformational advocacy? I signed up for a possible book study or having you speak, but we have no religious focus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't know that what I presented was particularly a religious focus. I happen to live, my mother-in-law and my father-in-law live with me. They are both ordained Presbyterian ministers, and my wife is an ordained Presbyterian minister, and I'm Jewish. And so we have a good old time in my household over here. But I don't know that anything I intended to say or said was so needing to be religiously focused. So I don't know that there would be any kind of problem with that. You know, I'm adding after the downs the sign up sheet again. So I've just put the sign up sheet in the chat for anyone who is interested in seeing that again. And so I don't think there'd be any problem for me talking to a book group that's not religious in any way, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Thank you, Sam. And I appreciate seeing all the I'm down messages. Terrific. Great to see. We'll be in touch. Sam, I do want to say, you know, something about, I think that the way that what you're presenting, you know, translates so well, and the way partially how I received it. I'm gonna be curious to kind of get your take on this, but I kind of view a lot of what Michael and I and others in the UCC are doing as being within what we would call maybe some of us would call the prophetic tradition. And there's some key, you know, things to the prophetic tradition, the centering of justice, the willingness to go public, and a willingness to confront those in power. And to me, a lot of, you know, kind of what we're figuring out often is, you know, which I think is different than maybe, you know, there are some other nonprofit organizations working on change is that confronting people in power, right? Which is ultimately what you're equipping people to do is, I take that, you know, word citizen, it gave me a new concept, maybe I'm sure it's, you know, but like prophetic citizens is like, that's in a sense what you're equipping people to do. Mm-hmm. Is just, I'm an ordinary citizen. I'm not a Moses or something special, but I can go and meet someone in power and present this message of justice ask them to, you know, call upon them to act on that message of justice.
And if I could just add this, when I'm coaching people, to me, let's say with their elected official on Bill HYZ or whatever, XYZ, the goal actually isn't to have them co-sponsor or support that bill. Of course it is. It's to create a relationship. It's not like, well, I met with them and they said, no, I'm out of here. I'm never coming. No. You want the relationship so that there's maybe a yes the next time or the time after that. So your goal is to build relationship so that you are able to continue coming back to, speak to power, basically. Um, uh,
Yeah.
I wrote someone yesterday, it's a longer story, but about that photo of Margaret Smith and Senator Cruz, it had a little bit of a David and Goliath a look to that particular photo. But
Yeah,
Appreciate that. I think there's a movie where it's something about, you go from no to maybe, and the maybe is really just a long yes, right? And so I like that. All right. Michael, do you have another question for us?
actually, I do. Sam, if we wanted other groups to get involved with what you're doing that weren't on this call, that isn't a part of the UCC, that maybe just be a part of the movement, even, how do we go about that?
now, do you mean others who aren't on this call that are part of UCC?
No, I'm saying
No,
that
no,
may
no.
not be
Well,
a part of
yeah, oh,
UCC.
let me say it this way. I train groups to do this kind of advocacy. And if I'm talking to a group that's like small or young or under resourced, I would usually tell them to go join one of these other groups, learn what they're doing, and steal it and bring it back to your group. Now, you can hire me and I'm expensive, or you could learn it somewhere else, and bring back what you learned. I mean, how do you meet with an elected official is how do you meet with how do you write a letter to the editor is how do you write a letter to the editor. Now, what the content is of your ask, okay, over there it might be one thing and with your group it might be different, but the scaffolding is the same, although
Yeah,
the ask itself might be unique to your group. And
yeah. I just believe that we are now in where we are right now. It's going to take us to really get out and advocate, to recenter us, or better, to center us. I don't think we've ever really been centered in care. It's going to take us literally going and having conversations, not just with people that are in office. I can't stand people saying people in power. Like I told y'all, power isn't dictated by an office, power is dictated by the people. And so if I would love to see people go and advocate to people in office to recenter care, but that's the only way I believe that we're going to move this needle to the place that it needs to be moved.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's some great comments in the chat right now. Yeah.
Sam, I think we have maybe time for one more comment from you. I know you've got to jump to an interview or another engagement, and we also have an urgent call to action we want to share with our audience as well as we wrap things up. But are there any final words? Maybe I know your initial background is as a musician. Are there any lessons or metaphors that you carried with you from that into your work today, maybe?
Well, let me say,
Or
and
closing words.
yeah, and I'm going to end with a quote. But as a musician, I'm very into practice. Don't go meet with your elected. No, practice, and then go meet with your elected official, kind of thing. So I'm very into that part of musicianship and advocacy. Not to mention, I would say the kind of innovative, think out of the box a bit part of musicianship and the like. I think I'll close with two quotes. I gave you the short quote, Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweiker, we aren't passengers on Spaceship Earth, we're the crew. The whole quote was, we aren't passengers on Spaceship Earth, we're the crew. We aren't residents on this planet, we're citizens. The difference in both cases is responsibility. And I'm going to do the other quote quickly. And the quote is, it was, in fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. Alex Steffen. The whole quote was, optimism is a political act. Those who benefit from the status quo are perfectly happy with a large population of people who believe nothing will get any better. In fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. What's really radical is being willing to look right at the magnitude and difficulty of the problems we face and still insist that we can solve those problems. It's a bit the prophetic back there again. I'm going to leave the sign-up sheet again in the chat and my email. Someone seemed to ask, how do we get in touch with you? sam@civiccourage.org, sam@civiccourage.org. And it's been a thrill and an honor being with you all. And thank you for the invitation and having me with you. And here's the sign-up sheet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam, for inviting us and informing us and educating us about the art and the practice of becoming a social change advocate and being a social change advocate. So thank you so much. This is a wealth of information and knowledge and wisdom that you have shared with us today. And I can see it in the hearts and applause, that emojis that are coming up on the screen. So we're really grateful for you to be here today.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. As we close, we do have an important call for action. If there's one thing actually just to do today at some point, I would urge all of you to click on a link we're going to share of ABC News coverage. This is national news coverage. They've done more than one national story on this year. It's about a community in Alabama. It's called Shiloh. It's a predominantly Black community that over the past 6 years has been dealing with the aftermath, something that happened under the first Trump administration, where the federal government provided funding for a highway expansion project and signed off on all the plans of how this highway expansion would happen. And so the expansion was done. And it was literally done in a way so that the highway would be raised 15, 16 feet off of where it was, and all the water from that highway would be shunted, literally shunted, towards the houses of this predominantly Black community, to the extent which, if it rains for 15 minutes, these houses are flooded. These houses are literally sinking feet into the ground. They have cracks in the walls. Robert Bullard, who many of you might remember we had as a guest this past year for one of our webinars, he's known as the father of environmental justice. He literally wrote the book on environmental racism and highways, because this is a big problem all over the United States, is what happens when highways are constructed and expanded and so forth, and how communities are impacted. Robert Bullard said that this is the worst instance of environmental racism of this kind that he has seen in 45 years. That's how bad it is for this community. This past week, we hosted members of Shiloh here in the national offices while they did a press conference. And the Reverend Timothy Williams, who's one of the people affected by this flooding, he spoke. He came with his 2 daughters, and his 2 daughters literally could not speak because of the health impact of the mold in their house. That's how serious this situation is, right? Mold caused by this chronic flooding that they're experiencing. And so I want to encourage people to watch that ABC video just so you can kind of see with your eyes what this reality is like. And then to click on a link that we're going to share. The Sierra Club and the Bullard Center for Environmental and Climate Justice, they have come together with a call to action for communities of faith to share a prayer from Reverend Williams, to raise awareness in your congregation about this issue. And really, ultimately, what we want to do is we have this small window of opportunity to call upon Secretary Buttigieg to make a wrong right before his time as secretary is over. So this is a very small window of opportunity. That's why people are really doing whatever they can to raise awareness and to generate some calls to Buttigieg. Mike, you want to jump in on that and say anything?
Brooks, I just want to add to that to make situations worse, Reverend Timothy would tell you about a pipeline that's right by, I think, by his house actually, that's leaning over because of the flood, and the ground is losing its density. So the actual project is leaning over, and if that leaks or spills, they're in real serious trouble. So it's not just a thing of where we want to make their lives better, but we want to make them safe as well. They are in imminent threat of something really serious or catastrophic happening. So, people of faith, it's our time now to stand up after we've gotten our ass to do so.
Thank you, Michael. So we're grateful for everyone being here today. I think in many ways, to kind of tie this all together, what's happening with Shiloh is sort of emblematic of the kind of struggle and movement building that we're going to need in the coming year, right? Because really a lot, when we look at some of the good things that have happened in our country, a lot of it's had to be, if you looked at Justice 40, the Inflation Reduction Act, the ethical center of a lot of this stuff is repairing the harm that's been done environmentally to communities and then funding hope, right? And that's where we can come in as a growing movement, is to say we need to defend these programs that are repairing harm and that are funding hope. These programs can't go away, and it's going to be up to us to help make sure that they don't go away. And so that will be a key struggle in the coming year. I just want to end on that, and I'm just grateful to see all of the interest in the Climate Hope affiliate program that will be launching early in the next year. Look forward to being in touch with many of you. Next month, we'll be back with another webinar. We'll be looking at toxic media and how that leads to a toxic environment. We'll have some experts that will talk about the current media environment, the media conglomerates that control and shape a lot of the information that we get about the environment, and that ultimately creates and shapes the kind of political will that exists, and the kind of government that we have. And so that will be our focus next month. We've got some great speakers lined up for that. Great to see all of you here today. God bless and take care.